His guitar didn't just sing, it wept. It roared. It told stories no words could ever capture. Duane Allman wasn't just a rock star. He was a revelation. A self-taught genius who changed the course of American music in just a few short years. As the soul behind the Allman Brothers Band and a master of slide guitar, he defined the sound of Southern rock and helped birth an entirely new musical movement. But just as the world was waking up to his brilliance, tragedy struck. At only 24 years old, Duane was killed in a high-speed motorcycle crash in Macon, Georgia. The headlines spoke of heartbreak, of loss. But decades later, a shocking truth came to light, one revealed by his own daughter in a raw and painful memoir. This is the untold story of Duane Allman, the blazing talent, the haunted final hours, and the terrible medical mistake that turned a tragedy into something even worse. Howard Duane Allman was born on November 20, 1946, in Nashville, Tennessee. He was the elder of two sons. His younger brother, Greg, would later become his musical partner, his closest ally, and the voice of the band they would build together. But the Allman boys grew up in the shadow of loss. Their father, Willis Allman, was murdered by a hitchhiker when Duane was just 3 years old. The trauma lingered. Music, it seemed, was the only thing powerful enough to lift them from that darkness. Duane's obsession with the guitar began in his early teens. He'd lock himself in his room and practice for hours on end, mastering blues licks from records by B.B. King, Muddy Waters, and Elmore James. It was Elmore's bottleneck slide technique that struck a chord with Duane, a raw, aching sound that felt like it came from somewhere deep inside. Soon, Duane had developed a style that was unmistakably his own, fluid, fiery, and full of soul. His slide guitar didn't just play notes. It cried out. It reached across generations. By the late 1960s, Duane had made a name for himself as a sought-after session guitarist in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. He played behind legends like Aretha Franklin and Wilson Pickett, earning the nickname, Skydog, for his speed and spirit. But he wanted more than session work. He had a vision, a band that could take blues, jazz, country, and rock and fuse them into something new. In 1969, that dream became real when he formed the Allman Brothers Band. The lineup was electric. Greg Allman on vocals and organ. Dickie Betts, a melodic genius on lead guitar. Barry Oakley's thundering bass. Butch Trucks and Jimo keeping double time on the drums. And Duane, the quiet storm at the center, lighting every stage on fire. From the moment they played together, it was clear, this was no ordinary band. They released their self-titled debut in 1969, but it was their 1971 live album, At Fillmore East, that made them legends. The album captured the band's improvisational magic and raw energy, especially Duane's breathtaking solos on songs like Whipping Post and Statesboro Blues. Outside of the band, Duane recorded one of the most iconic guitar duets in rock history. Eric Clapton invited him to join Derek and the Dominoes' Fourth Layla. The result? Pure magic. Clapton later said, Duane was like a musical brother. He just understood what I was saying before I said it. Duane's life was music. He lived it, breathed it, dreamed it. He didn't care for the spotlight or the fame. He wore old jeans, rode motorcycles, and spent most of his time jamming with friends or mentoring younger musicians. Those who knew him said he was intensely focused but full of joy. He could be quiet one moment, wild the next. But on stage, he was transcendent, completely lost in the music, channeling something divine. He wasn't without demons. The pressures of fame and relentless touring wore him down. He was exhausted but refused to rest. There was always another gig, another song, another perfect take waiting for him. And then, in October 1971, just as the Allman Brothers were climbing to their peak, everything came crashing down. October 29, 1971. Macon, Georgia. Duane was riding his Harley-Davidson Sportster, weaving through the streets of the town he had come to love. He wasn't racing, just cruising, maybe clearing his head. As he approached an intersection, a flatbed truck pulled into his path. Duane swerved. He lost control. The bike went down. And then, in a horrifying instant, the motorcycle landed on top of him. Paramedics arrived quickly. He was conscious. Bruised and bloodied, but still alive. There was hope. At the hospital, Duane was prepped for surgery. Doctors told the family it was serious, but survivable. And then, in the operating room, something went terribly wrong. For years, the details of Duane's death remained vague. A tragic accident, fans were told. Nothing more. But decades later, his daughter, Galadrielle Allman, published her memoir, Please Be With Me. In its pages, she shared the haunting truth that had been hidden for so long. During surgery, a critical mistake was made. A doctor, rushed, perhaps inexperienced, misplaced an organ while trying to stop internal bleeding. The error led to a cascade of complications. Duane began bleeding internally. His condition worsened rapidly. And just like that, he was gone. There were no lawsuits. No accountability. Only silence. And a grief that would haunt his family forever. For Galadrielle, who never got to know her father, the truth was almost too much to bear. Her memoir is a beautiful but aching tribute to a man she only knew through stories, music, and second-hand memories. Duane Allman was just 24 when he died, but his influence stretched far beyond his years. Rolling Stone would later rank him as the second greatest guitarist of all time, just behind Jimi Hendrix. His solos are still studied, his phrasing still unmatched. Guitarists speak his name with reverence. Fans, old and new, find themselves moved by the raw emotional truth in his playing. The Allman Brothers Band continued, devastated but determined. In 1972, tragedy struck again when bassist Barry Oakley died in another motorcycle accident just blocks from Duane's crash site. Yet somehow, the band endured, turning pain into power. In the decades that followed, Duane became a symbol, not just of musical brilliance, but of how fleeting genius can be. His story is one of passion, of brotherhood, and of unfinished symphonies. And in the words of his daughter, the sound of his guitar is the sound of his soul. That soul still echoes through every riff, every note, every heart he touched. If Duane Allman's music touched your life, we invite you to share your story in the comments. Let his legacy continue to inspire a new generation of dreamers and musicians. Please like, subscribe, and help us keep the memory of this musical giant alive. Because legends never really die. They just fade into melody, and Duane Allman's melody will echo forever.